Hello! We have come to that time of the month where I talk to you about all the books I've read. January was kind of a hard month for me, mental health wise. Apparently that led to me doing a lot of reading. I read a lot of books this month. I read 23 books. So I feel like this video is going to be on the longer side. So maybe grab a cup of tea. I have a coffee. Let me grab my coffee. Oh, here it is. Grab something to fuel you through this video. I'm gonna try and keep it short, I promise, but with 23 books, there's only so much I can do. I'm gonna start with the books that I read for videos or in videos, so that I can keep it as brief as possible. I'm just gonna tell you pretty much like a one sentence thing about each one. First up we have Iron Flame. I read this for a full spoiler video. I gave this 5 stars. I really enjoyed it. It destroyed me pretty much from beginning to end. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Fourth Wing, if you can believe it. So we started with Iron Flame. And I started reading for a video that you haven't seen yet. So I'm just going to tell you what I read and what I rated it, but if you want more thoughts, keep your eye out for a new video coming up. I read Annie Bot by Sierra Greer. I gave this like a 3.754 star. I enjoyed it, but it's not my favourite sci-fi I've ever read. I picked up The Fellowship of the Ring, which is the first book in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I just finished this morning actually, and again I'm giving it like a 3.754 star, around there. I picked up The 7-Year Slip for this video, which I ended up really enjoying. I ended up giving this a 5 star. The whole way through I was convinced it wasn't going to be 5 star, but then by the end it had won me over. And I think the only romance that comes close to this is Happy Place. This was a really strong book for me. And then lastly for that video I picked up the first book in the Zodiac Academy. I ended up reading the first 3 books of that series. Can you hear the kitten? He's trying to escape. Let me know. What was I saying? Zodiac Academy. I ended up reading the first 3 books of that series. I gave them a 3.5, a 3.5 and a 4 star. But if you want more thoughts on that, stick around for the video that's coming out. I read, in a chaotic couple of days of my life, I read The Safe Keep. I think I kept my rating secret, but I ended up giving it a 4 star. I really enjoyed this book. I don't know what to say when I'm trying to keep it brief. I really enjoyed this book. It took a turn that I wasn't expecting. I ended up really liking this. I also read this because it's a Booker Prize shortlisted, and I think so far this is my favourite shortlisted Booker Prize book that I've read. Then I read 4 books for my trying to finish my TBR in 24 hours video. I read Done and Dusted, which I think I gave like a 3.5. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. I read The Drift by CJ Tudor, which I gave a 4 star. Really enjoyed it. It's kind of a horror thriller disease kind of book. I read Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks. I gave this 3 stars. This was probably the most outside my comfort zone book that I read this month, and I think that it just wasn't exactly for me. And I read The Princess of Potential, which I gave a 4.25. Not my favourite installment in this series, but still a really good book. That's all the books that I talked about in videos, so now I'm going to tell you more about the books I read. I have my notes down here so I don't forget anything. The last book on my TBR that I didn't show you was The Return to the Daggett Dream Department Store. I really liked this book. I think I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed the first one actually. I felt like it dealt with some more kind of interesting topics that I hadn't thought about relating to dreams, and that was really interesting for me to get to read. It's So it's the sequel to the Delicate Dream Department Store, which is a department store that sells dreams to sleeping people, and it's about Penny, who works there. In this book, she's been there for a year, so she gets access to a new kind of area that she hasn't had access to before. I felt like it was a really good sequel. It built on what we had already learned. And honestly, I would keep reading books about this department store. If more books existed, I would read them because I really enjoy them every single time. I read a couple of like YA mystery thrillers this month. I read The Inheritance Games, which is about Avery, who suddenly learns that she has inherited billions of dollars, I believe, from a man that she has never met. And she goes there, and in order to get her inheritance, she needs to live at the manor with the family for a year. And while she's at the manor, she uncovers all these like secrets and riddles and games and things like that. And so it's her teaming up with the 4 boys, the 4 grandsons of the man, to solve these riddles and figure out what is going on in the manor. I gave this 3.5 stars. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. But I felt like some of the riddles weren't intended for you to solve, and I really wanted to be able to solve the riddles along with them. But because you weren't given all the information, you literally couldn't solve the riddles, and I found that a little bit frustrating. Coffee break. I also read 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. This is about Red. It's from the point of view of Red, and she is going on a summer spring break with 5 people, some of whom she considers friends. They're going in an RV, they're doing a cross-country road trip. They break down, and eventually they figure out the reason why they've broken down is because they're being shot at by someone with a sniper rifle. The person with the rifle reveals that there is a secret that one of them knows, and they want to know what that secret is. Thrilling times ensue. It takes place over one night. It's split up into the 8 hours that happens overnight. I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. I think Red is quite a frustrating character. She shuts herself down a lot of the time. She's quite meek. She's not very strong-willed, or she doesn't really take charge of a situation. She's pretty happy to be led along by other people, and that can be quite frustrating to read it sometimes when you know there's a better answer than what they're choosing to do. But I did really enjoy it. It was a really fast-paced read, and I had fun. I read 4 audiobooks this month. I didn't always completely read them, but I logged them as audiobooks if I majority listened to them rather than reading them. And they start with The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. This was a reread for me. It's kind of a self-help, kind of a memoir. It's about a year in Gretchen's life where she decides to really take charge of the happiness she has in her life, and she makes resolutions for each month to try and boost happiness. I gave this 4 stars. I really enjoyed it when I listened to it the first time, and I really enjoyed it this time. It's narrated by the author, and I think she does a really good job. It's a really good own voices kind of retelling in her own words with her own voice. It feels very kind of right for the audiobook for her to have narrated it. Do I think it's the most useful book in the world? I don't know. Her resolutions are very personal to her, and I don't think they would apply to everyone. But I think it's a really good starting off point if you want some ideas of how to bring happiness into your life. I think it's well researched and it's well done, is what I would say. I also listened to Quicksilver, which I ended up giving 4 stars. It's about a girl who gets caught stealing, and just as she's about to be punished, a portal opens and a man comes through and he takes her through the portal. She has some magical powers which are very important, so she becomes quite an important person, and it is a fantasy romance. I really liked the audiobook for this. It has 2 narrators, but it only has one point of view. So basically the female narrator narrates the whole thing, but whenever a male character speaks, there's a male narrator. And I think he does a really good job at differentiating the different male characters, because there are quite a lot of them. There's a whole bunch of men in this book. So the fact that he was able to differentiate them so clearly, I think, was really, really great. Next up I read The Housemaid by Freida McFadden. This is a thriller about a woman who was recently in prison, and she gets a job as a housemaid for a rich family. She takes the job thinking it's going to be the thing to kind of save her and change her life. And as the book goes on, things get progressively weirder and more unhinged with the family. And it's quite tense and kind of interesting. I gave it a 3.5. I don't think it's the best thriller I've ever read, but I did have a good time with it. And I think if you want something like really easy and digestible to read, then it's quite a good one. And it does have quite a kind of shocking, twisty ending when you find out what's really going on with the household. So I would recommend it for someone looking for something just really fun, quick and easy to read. Oh, my voice is going. The last audiobook I listened to, but I do have the physical copy because I read along with it, is A Man Called Ove. This is about a man called Ove who is a very grumpy man. He's living a very kind of solitary life, and he's going about his business, and he's very unhappy about it all. The thing I didn't expect from this book is that it kind of jumps backwards and forwards. So we'll have a chapter that is happening in real time in the present, but then we'll jump back and you'll learn about his past and how he grew up and how he got to where he is today. I ended up giving this a 3.5. It was my first Fredrik Backman and I had really high hopes for this. And I think, unfortunately, this was just a case of reading the wrong book at the wrong time. I was having a really hard day and I looked up books to read when you're having a hard time, and this was one of the suggestions that a lot of people had. There is triggering subject matter in this book, and I found that subject matter really not helpful when I was feeling so sad. And it takes, I think, quite a long time to get to the point in this book where that subject matter stops happening. I found this actually a really difficult read, and I think if I had read it at a different time I might have liked it more. It did get me by the end. I did cry by the end, which is why I got a 3.5. Okay, then I picked up some adult mystery thrillers and I want to talk to you about them. I picked up Such a Quiet Place by Megan Miranda. I picked this up because Storygraph told me that this was fast paced. I thought this was so slow. Nothing happened for the whole book. That's not true. You're learning about stuff, you're learning about stuff, you're learning about stuff, then something happens, and then you're just learning about stuff again. And then there's kind of a twist, is what I would say. So I would not rate this book as a fast-paced book. The storyline is we're following Harper, and Harper at one point had a roommate, and they live in this very small community of people who know each other quite well. And Harper's roommate was arrested and convicted for the murder of their two neighbours. She has since been let out of prison due to technicalities over the case, and she comes back to the community and to live with Harper. And it's this kind of tense, mysterious book, I would say. I ended up giving it 3.5. I don't know if I would have rated this higher if I read it at a different time, but I was looking for something really fast-paced and this wasn't it. But I think there is the possibility that you could enjoy it if you really enjoy that kind of small, tight-knit community tension. There's a lot of tension within the community, and I think if you enjoy that, you could really enjoy this book. The other thriller that I picked up is Prey by James Carroll. This is a book about Jefferson Winter, who was an FBI profiler and now kind of works freelance. And he goes into a cafe after he's closed a case and he's just chilling out, and then something really shocking happens within the first 10% of this book. Less than that. In the first chapter, in the first 9 pages of this book, something really shocking happens. And I was really surprised by it. I love the Jefferson Winter series. This is the first book that I have physically read rather than listen to the audiobook, but I think it still stood up really well. The audiobooks are a really great experience, but this was just as good. I gave it 4 stars. I really enjoy the whole premise of Jefferson Winter, and I will continue to read Jefferson Winter books over and over and over again because I love them. I'm sorry if the camera angle changed, my memory card ran out of space, which has never happened to me before. But we just have 2 more books. We just have 2 more books. So I'll just tell you about them. That's how this works. There's 2 more books and I'll tell you about them. First of the 2 is The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. This is a children's book about a robot called Roz who opens her eyes for the first time, and she is on an island, and it is her making the island her home. This was a very sweet book. I picked up this book because I thought it was going to make me cry, and it did. I gave this 4 stars. I think this would be a great book to read for kids. I think it's a good book to read as an adult as well. It's very much focused around nature and life cycles and growth within nature and that kind of thing. And I think it was a really good book for me to read at the time. I had a really good time reading it because it's a kid's book. It was very quick and very short. There's lots of great illustrations in it, done by the author. So if that's your jam, I would recommend it. They've also made it into a film. So I am now inspired to watch that film. The last book I read this month that I haven't told you about is A Magical Girl Retires. It is about a girl who is drowning in credit card debt and is struggling with her life. So she decides to unalive herself. And while she's in the process of doing that, someone comes up to her and says, "Hey, don't do that. I think you're the magical girl that's going to save the world." And the story goes from there, her discovering about magical girls, understanding what they do. It's kind of an interesting take on the idea of like people with superpowers, because there's quite a lot of things they need to sort out, like who you work for, how you get paid, what kind of role you take on, what kind of thing your superpower will do in order to help other people. It's this kind of interesting story, and the way and the reason that people get powers is also very interesting. I was halfway through it and I was like, this is a 5-star read. I love this book. I think this is going to be amazing. And then it just got a little bit heavy-handed in its messaging. So I just lowered it down to a 4.5, but I did really enjoy it and I had a great time doing it. I wanted to talk really briefly about my reading month as a whole, because I was doing a challenge this month to see if I could read every single day, and I achieved that challenge. But it means that Storygraph has given me this nice little graph of my reading, and I just wanted to show you how vastly changeable it is how much I read in a day. It's never consistent. At no point was I reading a consistent amount every single day. I think the least I read was 17 pages, and the most I read was 826 pages, which was part of my 24-hour reading challenge. You can really see by this graph that the amount I read varies a whole lot. But I also wanted to talk about my ratings for this month, because I think this was a great month for me. I ended up with an average of 3.9. I might go in and adjust some of these ratings because I think some of the books have stuck with me more, so I think their rating should be higher, and some books I've just completely forgotten about, so I think their rating should be lower. But generally, this was a really, really great reading month for me. I managed to pick up books that I, in general, really liked, and I want to keep on with that. So that's the goal, is to keep on reading books I like, which I'm sure is everyone's goal, but specifically that's my goal for the next month. And that's it. That's all 23 books I read. Here are the physical copies of the books that I have, and now I have to put them all away in my beautifully rearranged shelves. But thank you for being here with me today. I promised I'd try and make it quick, and I think I did. I think I did a good job at that. There isn't a huge amount of footage for me. Only about half an hour of me yapping on. So hopefully this was interesting to you, and I'll see you in the next video.